I'm gonna. So, welcome everyone. It's the day before the 17th of Tammuz in this very fate-filled year of Tafshin Daled. And I just want to start by saying that it's a well-known thing in Hasidus, in Pnimius Torah, that the 3 weeks, which begin tonight, actually, technically, that most poskim say that already tonight, you should avoid things that are prohibited on during the 3 weeks, not just in the morning. And not, so not weddings tonight. It's machlokas poskim, but many say that it starts in the evening. So here we are, Erev Shavas B'Tammuz. So it's the beginning of the 3-week period, a few hours. And the analogy is that as much as the 3 weeks are right now a period of avelus, which means loss of the potential, things that were destroyed. Artubate Mikdash. This was there are 5 things that happened on Shavas B'Tammuz in different eras. Of course, the idea of Shaviras Haluchos Segal Azov, but we also have the sending out of the Meraglim. People don't usually list that as something, but it was the day that the Meraglim actually took to their journey, returning 40 days later. Excuse me, I'm sorry. They were sent out earlier because it was 3 weeks until Tisha B'Av, so they were sent out a week earlier. Okay. Now, that means that this period of time, which has descended into a period of Avelus, actually has the potential to be exactly like another opposite period in our calendar. What are the 3 most joyous or spiritually fulfilling 3 weeks of the Jewish calendar? In which month did it take place? Well, that would be Tishrei. In other words, Rosh Hashanah till Sukkot, till Simchas Torah, which of course was such a, unfortunately, Avelus type event that diminished our Simcha, can actually be transposed onto the 3 weeks. So if you follow, that means that Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, which is otherwise known as Rosh Hashanah, corresponds to the 17th of Tammuz. And Tisha B'Av corresponds to none other than Simchas Torah. And if there ever was a time where there was a blur between the lines between these 2 periods, it was in this year. That's not necessarily a tragic thing. And I'll tell you why. Because since we know that the 3 weeks are destined to become Yomim Tovim, tonight is lit. Today is Erev Rosh Hashanah. Erev Rosh Hashanah is a tremendous day of tshuva. It's the day that you go to the tzaddik or you go to Kivrei Avos. It's Shulchan Aruch and all the Sifrei Chasidus. You say Avidui, and you ask for kapara, slicha mechila kapara. So it's the period of tshuva intensely begins of the 3 weeks of Tishrei, which culminate in Simchas Torah. And here is the parallel, is that it will culminate in Tisha B'Av. But the point being is that perhaps what we're actually seeing is the beginning of the transformation of this time period into Yemei Simcha. Now, I say that from a hopeful point of view. Who knows what's actually supposed to take place in America with probably the 3 people that are most talked about in the world? Who are the 3 most talked about people in the world today? Can anybody help me out here? Meantime,
Biden, Trump, and Bibi.
Yes, but I would say that might have been last week. And what about this week?
Oh, Kamala the heckler.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to make a bracha, but I don't want the bracha recorded, okay? Can I just stop the recording for 1 second? Yes, Kamala Harris, President Lame Duck Biden, and Netanyahu are all coming together to meet, the three of them, on what day? Shivasar B'Tammuz. This is the news. You can't even make this stuff up. Why in the world would Netanyahu want his most important meeting of being in America, or maybe more important than he meet Trump? But the first meeting is going to be on Shivasar B'Tammuz, Beizmir. That's the day where we commemorate the breach of Yerushalayim, and certainly we've seen an attempt of increasing magnitude, which culminated this past week, in the declaration that any area where Israel has post 67 is an illegal settlement and must be withdrawn from. Wow. We never even had that. Obama did such a thing at the very end of his presidency, but this now has gone from Obama to the International Criminal Court, criminalizing, and we have in this year the criminalization of Israel in general. Just an unfathomable turn of events. So at first, I was deeply concerned about the fact, thinking about it, that this meeting is taking place on Shavasar B'Tammuz. This doesn't seem to be an auspicious moment. Couldn't get it in earlier, or even a day later. But on the other hand, perhaps we look at this as the beginning of a new Rosh Hashanah. Remember, Shavasar B'Tammuz corresponds to Rosh Hashanah. Tisha B'Av corresponds to Simchas Torah. The next 3 weeks are therefore critical, and they may be filled with tremendous miracles. And in fact, that's the position of the Talmidim of Baal Shem Tov, and those who focus on Pnimis Torah tend to reconsider or reframe or recast in their mind these 3 weeks towards their future, towards the fulfillment of their future potential, not looking past, not looking towards the past. It's ironic that Kamala Harris, probably only intelligent saying that she has, she's famous for, is that she wants to look to something like this. She wants to look for the future unburdened by the past. Well, maybe indeed, unburdened by the past disappointments of Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, which are well documented, and we'll talk about them over the next couple of weeks. Perhaps this is a new start, our start of the process by which these days are going to be transformed into good. Now, I have to admit that I do have my concerns about the events of this last 24 hours. What happened, everybody, the last 24 hours? Less. What happened? Tell me. What did we experience here in Israel and around the world?
Here in Israel, we had an earthquake.
There was an earthquake in Israel, yeah?
Yeah, down in the Dead Sea area.
Oh, that's interesting. That's telling. And there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C. as well, because the president withdrew. What's very curious about the way he withdrew is that it was like an electronic note. He might have been like bound and gagged, for all we know. When they send this out, he doesn't appear. He doesn't say anything until maybe afterwards. I don't know. But this was a coup. And how I'm going to go a step deeper. Again, why I'm saying this? I'm saying these things because you should try to see just the opposite. These things come to my attention. I don't know why, but I noticed them. Okay. Who are the two Jewish people who are in powerful positions? One, a billionaire, or at least a billionaire's son, and one, a governor, and a third Jew that are prominently being associated with Kamala Harris. And this worries me, that 3 Jews who are none of them as big supporters of Israel or the Jewish people. And in fact, they might be viewed as dangers to Israel and the Jewish people. Who do we have? Number one, Kamala Harris's erstwhile husband is Jewish. He never identified Jewish. His children were raised as Christians. Okay, but now all of a sudden he's become the super Jew of the White House. And don't let this, you have to understand, in the thinking of secular Jews, who to them Torah and mitzvos and even support of Israel is not the most important thing, but rather just, it's kind of like a club of good, smart people who have a lot of high principles. The Jewish people, no matter what you say, had nothing to do, just in their very essence, are very high level people and accomplish great things. That's Klal Yisrael. Her husband is being touted as a Jew, and people who are Jewish will see that and say, "Oh yeah, this is kosher." It's kind of like a hechsher. I don't know if they're concerned about kosher, but for them, it's good enough. There's a little yid. There's a yid over there. To them, that's very, very important. But that's not where it ends. Number two, her proposed running mate, his name is Shapiro. And that would mean Governor Shapiro, I forget which state he is, I think of Pennsylvania, ultra liberal, no friend of Israel, is being touted as her Sagan. And that means that it would be the first time that you had a Jewish vice president of the United States. We almost had it before with a much better, Democrat back in the day. Who knows who's Shomer Shabbos? Senator Lieberman. He really won the vote, but they lost the electoral campaign by what they call little pieces of paper, little nothings. I forget what they were even called back then, when they were looking at chads, I think, chards or chads, where they're counting the ballots in Florida to see if he won. So here, look what would happen if she won. Number one, you'd have the first gentleman in the White House being a Jew. And then you'd have in the White House the vice president who is a Jew. But that's not all. The first person that came out, and this made my jaw drop, really. Her first endorsement of a major money donor was from none other than, I don't know if anybody knows, Alex Soros, son of George Soros, who is the main funder of the anti-Israel and basically anti-civilization campaign, anti-law. And guess who he just married? This fellow, sadly, Alex Soros, got married to none other than Huma Abedin, the former chief of staff to Hillary Clinton, whose parents are actively members of the Muslim Brotherhood. That means Hamas. So there's a shidduch between Hamas and Soros. Now, you can't make these things up. And then he comes out and endorses Harris. So these three Jews, each of them very high profile, influential, will be able to disarm any Jewish voter in America from saying, why should I vote for Trump? Here we have this nice Jewish lady, Jewish connected lady. Everybody around her is Jewish. Her biggest donor is Jewish. Her husband is Jewish. Her vice president is possibly Jewish. How do you beat that? How do you beat that exactly for the American Jewish vote, which just maybe 24 hours ago would have shifted dramatically towards Trump? Okay? So I'm stunned. I'm really stunned. And I'm concerned. And, so we have to look at this. I have a unique perspective to share with you based on the teaching that we're saying. Okay. And here's what it is. All right, let me start. We know that this past week we read Parshas Bilam, right? It's an interesting quirk of history that several hundred years ago, and it may go back as it seems to go back at least 800 years. There was a minhag that developed through the Sofrim that every time they wrote a Sefer Torah, they would use a device called Vave Ha'amudim. Vav is the hooks of the Amudim, the columns of the Mishkan. And how would they portray that? You see, a Yiriyah, like in the Mishkan, is a curtain, but in a Sefer Torah context, it's a panel. You know, the panel of that was made into cloth. You know, that was taken from animal skins and turned into cloth, which you could write on as a scroll. So there was a very fancy high-end sofer going back to the times of the Maharshal, and even as far back as the mayor of Rottenburg, 1200s, who started this idea that every column of the Torah should begin, not every, but almost every column of the Torah should begin with the letter Vav. Okay? Today's Torahs, you will find a preponderance, if not all, Sifrei Torah, primarily the columns begin with a Vav. If you just flip through, this is interesting. There's a fellow named Mr. Hiller who spoke at Eish Kodesh Friday night who raised some of these points. So I started to think about it and research it. Spoke about the idea of the Vav Amudim. Where does it come from? So the Sofrim felt that it was a beautiful idea because what you're doing is you're kind of like building a Mishkan around the Torah. In a sense, you're using the Torah to create a living Mishkan. After all, every shul, we call it, back from the times of the Gemara Megillah, is called the Mikdash Me'at. And we say that in Asidin Yisrael, all these shuls will eventually really have a Bechina of Eretz Yisrael. They're like a little bit Yerushalayim, and they'll all be transported at the end of days here. Whatever that means, literally or figuratively. I won't go into that. But they're like embassies. I can call them like an embassy. Israel has an embassy. America has an embassy in Israel that was a target of the Houthi attack, right? Baruch Hashem, there was a response to them. Finally, after hundreds, maybe thousands of unprovoked missile attacks, right? Finally, Israel did something. And that's not a small thing either. But be it as it may, if every Torah is written with the Vadi Amudim, there's going to be several columns that won't. It's generally 6. The first one, of course, is Bereshis. You got to begin the Torah with a base. You're not going to begin the Torah with a Vav. There's no Vav in the word Bereshis. But there's another, so usually it's a total of 6 columns. And this actually is based on a minhag that began in the times of the Gaonim, which is in Tilim Kufdalet. It says, the pasuk says, we're gonna praise Hashem Bika Yud Beis Yud Hey. Because, so 3 of the columns are going to be started with Beis, starting with Bereshis, 1 column with a Yud, 1 column with Hey, and what's the second 3? Okay, Bika, and then 3 more letters. But universally, and one of them being a Mem. Of the 6 that were chosen, other than Bereshis, there was one that was accepted by scribes by Sofrim all over the world. And that's the Mem of Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkinosecha Yisrael from this past week's Parsha, from the words of Bilam, which also happen to be the first words one says in every sitter when you come into shul, right? You start Matovu Ohalecha Yisrael Mishkin, right? Every kid who got a sitter, the sitter party, started with Matovu. And on this, there was pushback from great figures like the Marshal, who said, there's a problem here. Why should we start every tefillah with the words of the foreign prophet, Bilam HaRasha, who was killed by Pinchas, this week's parsha, and who was able to cut through his web of sorcery by displaying Kodesh Lashem, actually the Shem HaMefurash, which was able to destroy and destruct his fancy wizardry and plunge him from the sky and be able to bring to judgment his two shitos, either that Pinchas killed him on the spot, or he did not do an extrajudicial killing like he did with Zimri ben Salu, but actually bring him to Moshe's court. And Moshe declared him Chayav Misa, and it was Moshe who killed him. Either way, the mem of Matovu has a place in the Siddur, first place, and it even pushes away the Vavei Ha'amudim. So you see the minhag of starting several columns with the letters of Psukim in Kuf Dalet in Kuf Dalet until Kuf Dalet preceded most likely the minhag of the Vavei Amudim. So that's why those 6 remain untouched, obviously gracious. But there's more to it. I would like to suggest that you can't take down the mem of Matovu Lech Yaakov because it's talking about the Mishkan. What are the Vavim? The Vavim are just the curtains holding up the Mishkan, right? Just holding up the Mishkan. So then when it says Mishkan Osecha Yaakov, of course you're not gonna start that paragraph with a Vav. It's like here's all the curtains and here's the mem. You're framing it, right? That and a couple of other ideas. I think just a Yud is Yehuda. Ata Yeducha Checha. Well, I'm not going to go into it right now. I would have, but there's not time. Okay, but my point is that why is this pasuk so central that it pushes away a pretty universal 1,000-year-old minhag of the Vavei Amudim takes precedence, and it's the first pasuk of our Torah, of every tefillah. And people protested. Why should it be? We can go to the next pasuk. Va'ani b'rov chastecha avo beisecha, right? Yishtachavu l'heichal Hashem. Va'ani b'rov chastecha avo beisecha. Is there any other better way to announce yourself that you're arriving in shul? Va'ani b'rov chastecha. I'm coming to shul. Why do you have to start Matov Olach Yaakov Mishkan Osecha Yisrael? Well, I thought maybe what it really is like you're coming towards shul, you see the Mikdash Ma'at, and then you say Vani Rav, and now I'm coming in the door, and you say Vani Rav Chasdecha. Perhaps that's the kavanah. But either way, those words of Bilam have enormous importance to us. Why? What is so special? After all, he's Bilam. Now, I just want to add something here. The Rambam, we just had recently in the Gemara Daf Yomi at the end of Bamitzia, spoke about who are the authors of each book of Torah, of the 24 books of the Torah, right? Because we were talking about splitting a Sefer Torah between partners or heirs. And so the Torah and the idea is that you can't cut a Torah scroll. And it went into start. So then it asked the question about what about if you have one scroll that includes all 24 books of Tanakh? After Devarim ends, you go straight into Yoshua, and then Shoftim, and it's all one big scroll. Can you then divide them by the books? And it says yes. You could divide the Torah into one, and then Yoshua into another one, Shoftim, etc. So once they got involved in that topic, the Gemara started to say, well, who authored all these 24 books? And Moshe Rabbeinu is attributed to, of course, his Sefer. And then it says something very strange. Uparshas Bilam. And the words, and the whole, what we would call Parshas Balak, because that's the name of the Parsha in the Torah, but it's really Parshas Bilam. It's the story of Bilam and his conversations and his attempted curses and his actual blessings. How did Moshe know what Balak and Bilam were talking about. They were nowhere near where Klal Yisrael was camped. They were far, far away. And yet Hashem gave a nevuah of the complete story in the exact formulation that it was divinely captured. And Moshe Rabbeinu was told it word for word from Hashem. He said, here, write this. Here, this is the part. Like Moshe got any other parsha. Like got the parsha of Tzitzis. Doesn't make a difference. Parsha's Bilam. So why does the Rambam call it, that Rambam say that he was co-save his Sefer and Sefer Bilam? Since when does Bilam have Yichus? We have the same problem at the end of the Torah with the last 8 psukim. And that is also discovered there. It says, who wrote the last 8 psukim of the Torah? We speak about the death of Moshe. Did Moshe write it? So there's 2 opinions. Either it was written by Yeshua, that Moshe dictated it to Yehoshua, right? So it was obviously Nevuas Moshe. Some people say that it was like a shared Nevuah between him and Yoshua. Or there's one Perush that Moshe wrote it Pedema. He wrote it with his own tears. In other words, he wrote it as Hashem dictated it to him. He actually wrote about his own death. But those 8 psukim have a quasi different status. You're not supposed to call people to the Torah in the middle of them. Gemara speaks about the special status of these 8 psukim, but Parshas Bilam seems to be unique and separate. Although it's embedded in the Torah, it's unique. It's very unique. Moshe Kasav Sifro Sefer Parshas Bilam, and also perhaps Eov. Some people attribute that Moshe wrote the book of Eov. Okay, which is widely disputed in the Gemara. So let's take a look. We want to understand the stupendous Shavasa B'Tammuz, in which the 3 people that the entire world, and Hashem, L'havdil, a million Havdalos from any comparison to human beings, is very good at PR. He's really good at public relations. If he wants to make himself known in the world, he can. Generally doesn't. But Nisim happen. Sometimes Nisim are more open, sometimes Nisim are less open. But what is the message that Hashem is giving us? That the past president, probably the future president, as far as the Democrats are concerned, and Bibi Netanyahu all come together in Washington, which is the capital of Rome, which is the capital of the Geulah today, most powerful country in the Christian world, which is America, and they're going to talk. And what are they going to talk about? Well, you know what they're going to say to Netanyahu. No settlements. We're going to put sanctions on you. They're going to say no. They're going to say no. You have to protect all the civilians. Oh, I say, they always say time and again this boring statement that we have an ironclad commitment to Israel. Right? Have you heard that? They say every single time for 20 years, every single press conference. Here's the ironclad right here. You see this? It's chains on there. It's very ironclad. Don't do this. Don't do that. Give this back. Give this back. We're prisoners. Very ironclad. Yes, we are prisoners. We are in Geulah. We do not have power for ourselves. Yeah, maybe sometimes they'll give us reshus to go do something like bomb the Houthis, because really America is a busha that they didn't do it themselves already months and months ago. So they'll let Israel do it. So let's take a look at the keystone words, at least from the perspective of Jewish liturgy and Safrus of Matov. Where does that come in to the parsha? Okay, so we have here in Parshas Balak a number of attempts that Bilam had to curse the Jewish people. A total of 3. Let's just examine them for a moment. Okay, I'll be careful about the time because I have a whole nother mahalach I want to share with you. The first thing that Bilam said, besides fighting with Hashem about going all together, is he tells Balak to build 7 altars and bring on them par va'ayil, a bull and a ram. Now that should set off a red light. And Rashi Chazal picked this up right away. They said, Avram only brought one ayil. That's the shofar of the Jewish people with which they get their judgment when? Rosh Hashanah, which is Zeh Mul Zeh. The opposite of Rosh Hashanah is Shivasa B'Tammuz. Rosh Hashanah sets the tone for the year. Shivasa B'Tammuz was the beginning of the destruction. Shivasa B'Tammuz was the beginning of the undoing of the Malchus Hashem through the Shviras Haluchos. Okay, so why a par and why an ayil? So Rashi says, look, I outed your forefathers. Avram Yaakov built a total of 7 mizbach, gave a total of 7 karbanos. I'm going to give 7 ayil plus par. Now let's think. When is the par, other than Yom Kippur, by the way, which is very important? In Yom Kippur, the par is and ayil are part of the service, but especially on Sukkot. How many parim do we bring on Sukkot? How many parim on Sukkot?
70?
70. Why? So we know that they represent the 70 nations. Either that they should diminish from their oppression of us, yes. That they should come towards knowledge of Hashem, for sure. That they should come to acknowledge and support the Jewish people and understand the benefits of the Beis HaMikdash that has to their lives. As we know, that's the time that the Goyim are supposed to come up. The Navi says to worship at Yerushalayim is Chag HaSukkos, which is why you still see, these parades that come on, the parades of the nations. They all come on Sukkos because that's what the Tanakh says. That's what the Nevi'im say. They're going to come and pay homage to Hashem on the Chag HaSukkos. So it's for the nations of the world. What is the sinister plot here about these 7 altars, which uproots Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and instead creates a parody? Because on each altar, a par and an ayil. What does that mean to say? Remember, in Shmini Atzeres, or Simchas Torah, there's only one animal left that represents Klal Yisrael. All the 70 are finished. They finish during the 7 days of Sukkot, right? They're done. But Shemini Atzeres is a lone animal. But what he does here with Bilam each time, it says, here's a par, 70 nations, and here's the Jewish people, and we're all the same. We're all part of the United Nations. One nation not better than any other. You have no claim to the land of Israel. Why would you have a claim to the land of Israel? Why would your claim be better than, so to speak, Balak's claim? And that's exactly the point, which is another interesting thing. What was Balak so upset about? Were Klal Yisrael coming to conquer the land of Moab? Yes or no? Did they have permission to conquer Moab? Absolutely not. Only the land of Sichon and Og, right? So what's he getting all bent out of shape about? Because he says, really, I'm the king. I know that I have in my possession the neshama of Moshiach is in my possession. That was Rus HaMoaviyah. Nahama HaAmonis. Ammon and Moab have 2 sparks of Mashiach. Rus, mother of the Davidic dynasty, and Naamah, the mother of the Solomonic dynasty. She was Shlomo Melech's wife. And it's very clear that Mashiach can only go through the lineage of David and Shlomo. There's no other lineages of David and Melech that don't flow through Shlomo and Melech. So there's a double header there that Balak had possession of, as if to say, we're the ones. We have Mashiach. As the Christians say, we have, of course, they stole a Jew and made him God, because they know that it's got to be connected to the Jews. Allah Kamara Harris. It's got to be connected to Jews. Otherwise, it's worthless. So I've got a couple of Jews in here with the Jewish money and the Jewish influence and the Jewish, assimilation, shita. Yeah, it's all good. But that's not that's a fake. That's counterfeit. So to the Muslims, they say, we have the Imam, the 9th Imam, the 10th Imam, the 11th Imam. He's Mashiach. And they both have a messianic vision, which they learned from us. Okay, so they got it, but they didn't get it. They, and this is exactly the point of Matovu Oholech Yaakov Mishkanasecha Yisrael. There is only one nation with whom the Jewish, which will be able to capture the Shechina for the benefit of the world, not the Dame. Now, there's an interesting Targum Onkelos. It says, Am lebadad yishkon, a nation that will dwell alone. Says Rashi, look at Onkelos. What does Onkelos have to say? He says, this is Am lebadad yishkon, says Onkelos, Ama bilchodehun atidin deyachsanun alma. This is the nation alone that will inherit the world, the whole world. Just like in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, in the end of days, the leader of the entire world will not be America, and it's not going to be China, and it's not going to be Russia, and it's not going to be the corrupt European nations. No, not even Iran or Persia or anybody else. It's going to be Klal Yisrael. Am Lubadad Yishkon. Here, Yishkon means that not only that the Shechina will be with us, but the whole Shechuna is ours. We are going to be the primary nation for the world. Okay? Yerushalayim is going to be the capital of the world, not New York, and certainly not The Hague. Okay? Everything comes through here, which is why the other capitals, right? The European capital of evil, which is The Hague and their International Court of Criminal Judges. That's what they are. They say the International Criminal Court. Yes, it's a court comprised of criminal judges. That's what they say. What are you? I'm a criminal judge. You're right. You're a criminal judge. Because they accuse us of being criminals. As the very first Rashi in Medrash says, I'm a Rav Yitzchak, the nations of the world will come and say, Ganavtem Eretz Shiva Amim, you stole the land. It's just, if you just open your eyes, the first Rashi in the Torah and the whole Torah of Bereshis from the very beginning says one thing about the nations of the world. They will come and say, you stole this land, you don't have any right to it. However, Bilam had to cough it up and admit that that was a falsity. As much as he wanted to prosecute us in every way, shape, or form, he was looking for that 1 minute a day which there's anger at the Jewish people in order to prosecute us like the International Criminal Court. So say Chazal that Hashem didn't allow him to be even a little bit angry at the Jewish people all the time that Bilam was trying to do those things, because he couldn't take a chance. Bilam would sniff it out and go for broke. They're going to go for any which taina they could say about the Jews. Jews are genocidal. Jews are thieves. What else do they want to say? Illegitimate, colonial. We're colonials. Ooh, terrible thing. Didn't America start with 13 colonies? I don't get it. Oh, that doesn't count. So, of course, we're colonials. All Americans are colonials by definition. 13 colonies. Oh, no. Let's roll back the clock. The founding fathers of America believed in a God-given inalienable rights. Now, I have to say that in God's infinite humor and wisdom, he has now forced them to kill their own leader, to force Biden out, to decapitate their own king, which is the ultimate of non-democracy. See, that's the way most kings in the world came and went. Even in times of Tanakh, unfortunately, Malchus Yisrael was like that. You were king until somebody killed you and took over. Basically, that's how it works. So that's not democracy. Democracy was supposed to be a higher value about the value of human beings. Does the Democratic Party value human beings? This is your guy. This is your person who you know, eight years of being a vice president, 50 years in the Senate, right? The head of everything. And then just some people start making fun of him, and you think you're going to lose, so you cut his head off. And then they have the gall to say that there's threat to our democracy. What democracy? Was there democracy when there was impeachment trials of fake things? And it's all the same players. And is there any justice or democracy to allowing Israel to do what it wants by its duly elected government, and to get up in Washington and say, no, you need a new prime minister? They try to do the same thing here as they did to us. They're very much trying to do it. All the Kaplan protests, all of this Meshugana hostage deal, with Hashem's help, we should rescue them, not surrender, the next Yahya Sinwar, because and perpetuate war of terror against us. No, let's rescue them. Rescue them. When Amalek came to attack the Jewish people after Aaron died, they took a ned there, last week's parsha, and they said there was only one woman there, a Shivcha Canaanis, that was taken captive, and the whole nation swore that if we conquer Amalek, we'll go to war with them, we're going to rescue this girl, and everything will go to a Cherem Lashem. That's how they reacted. That's the way to react to a hostage crisis. The way they did in Entebbe, the way they did, for many, many years, until the unfortunate approach, which remains entrenched today, of surrender and withdrawal of Eretz Yisrael. By the way, there's something I'm going to get my hands on. I just read about it, putting together the Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings on Eretz Yisrael, and from a perspective of how to deal with America and what to do with the negotiations and so on and so forth. They just put together a 90-minute presentation. I'm trying to get a hold of it, and if I do, I will definitely give over a summary of some kind, because I think that's what we have to now start aligning ourselves with the Diburim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, learn from all our mistakes, and hopefully we will learn from our mistakes. So Matovu Olecha Yaakov Mishkan Sachi Yisrael confirms the fact that there will be no Shechina, as Moshe Rabbeinu davened, on the Umos HaOlam. They need us. They take our Torah, they take our Tanakh, they take a Jew, the Christians do, and the Muslims take the whole Torah plus. But ultimately, they will look to us, and we have to be zoche and ready for that. We have to be zoche. Oh my goodness. So that's one. So that's the significance of Matovu Olecha Yaakov Mishkan Osecha Yisrael. Just to point out, it says Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov. Yaakov is the tent. Mishkan Osecha, the Mishkan, is Yisrael. Why do you think that is? Do you ever think about that? Now, of course, they always speak about Yaakov and Yisrael, but why did Bilam, and since it's such a key pasuk in the entire Torah, literally in the entire Torah, why do you think he associated Ohel with Yaakov and Mishkan with Yisrael? Any ideas? I think it's very simple. Ohel is the Avos, right? Vayet Ohel, Avram had an Ohel, Sarah had an Ohel, right? Yitzhak had an Ohel, Yaakov had an Ohel that became a point of controversy. The Ohel, which is a temporary dwelling in Eretz Yisrael, was the Avos. But the Mishkan, which was to become the Beis HaMikdash, right, embedded in Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh, when all the Shvatim, all the 12 Shvatim were formulated and also resided on their God-given Nachla, that's called the Mishkan. And that's when the Shekhinah is Shoreh in a more permanent sense. So of course it's Ohalecha Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu was the first one who created even the potential of the 12 tribes that would then camp around the Mishkan, right? So Yisrael is the follow-through of the accomplishment of the three Avos, culminating with Yaakov Avinu, to create Shiftei Ka, without impurities, without people like Yishmael or Esav who had to be thrown out, without Lot, without Eliezer Eved Avram, without those who would claim, even Balak and Bilam, who would claim, and Lavan, of course, because Lavan is Bilam, who would claim that destiny is theirs, that Hashem's voice in the world is spoken through their throats. And that was Bilam's agony. that he was forced to admit exactly and precisely what he was trying to avoid. He was forced to say words that Hashem said to him. This Rabbi Yochanan Zweig says, he was the donkey. You understand? Why did the donkey talk to Bilam? Because Bilam was being used like a donkey. Just like a donkey can't formulate words, but Hashem could speak through his throat. So too you, Bilam. You're nothing better than a donkey that I'm going to use to say my nevuos, which are going to be incorporated as part of nevuos Bilam into the Torah itself. Okay? We're coming to the end of our projected time, but I just want to share one more thought. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah? A few more minutes? Okay, listen carefully, and then I will wrap it up. If it's true, as the Svarim Kedoshim tell us, that the 3 weeks correspond to the 3 weeks of Tishrei culminating in Simchas Torah. So then, Shavasar B'Tammuz is Rosh Hashanah, right? And then 10 days later, approximately Rosh Chodesh Av, right, is going to be Yom Kippur. Rosh Chodesh Av, which is the beginning of the 9 days, 10 days hence, and then you have the rest of the 3 week period. So the 10 days in of the 3 weeks is the 10 days in of Tishrei, which is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur has there's a very interesting point, which is, who can tell me, what is the central, most essential avoda of Yom Kippur? Tell me. We sing it all the time, every year. What was the main job of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? If you could tell me. Had to bring a lot of
Kodeshim.
What did he do there?
He brought the Ketoret.
But the Keturah was a means to an end. The Keturah was like his admission ticket.
Oh, he also sprinkled
But
down.
he had a job to do there, right? To sprinkle the Dam Ha-Sa'ir and the Dam Ha-Par. The Par was the tshuva of the Kohanim, okay? It's the tshuva of the, how shall we say, the leadership of the Jewish people. When the Sanhedrin gets something wrong and everybody goes out and follows them and does an Aveira, they have to bring a par. Or the heads of the Shvatim have to bring a par. It's called Par Helam Davar. Whereas the Seh, right, the Seir, which is a goat, that's like the Karban Pesach is a goat. You can't bring a par for a Karban Pesach. It's not kosher for Karban Pesach. You can bring a little goat. Now the goat, how many goats were there? How many izim were there? 2. So if you really want to know, besides the par, which is the Kohen's tshuva, but let's focus on Klal Yisrael for a second. There were 2 seirim that brought kapara to the Jewish people. You know what they were? The seir that was done inside, meaning this blood was sprinkled inside. And then which other seir?
Azazel.
Azazel. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you an amazing question. How did they know if the tshuva worked?
It
The
turned
Mishnah,
white.
what turned white?
It's the string, whatever it's called.
On whose head? The Mishnah says the fellow who took out the Seir Mishtaleach, when they got to the Tzuk, which is very far, okay, there's a mil or a mile between the Beis HaMikdash and the first Sukkah, which was the Midbar, which was the beginning of the Midbar. Another Mishnah says 3 mils from the Beis HaMikdash was, you're in the heart of the Midbar. What we would call today the third sukkah. Everybody knows that there were 10 sukkos, and every sukkah, little resting place, that had water and food, in case the guy, the ish iti, who was maybe having to carry the seir, they said eat. He never really had to eat, but if he needed to, he would, because so crucial is the idea of getting the seir mishtaleach which brings tshuva and kapara for all averos, if you did tshuva, and getting them torn to pieces so we don't have to be. So what point did the thing turn white? So the Mishnah says that he would take a piece of that red string, tie one on a rock, and apparently leave the rock there, and then he would tie the rest on the head of the seir, and then push it off the cliff, and it would be torn avarim avarim. Okay, why do you need to tie a piece on the rock? Says the Gemara, because we're afraid that if he doesn't pay attention and see the color change when he's pushing off the seir, I mean, he might get distracted. He's going to be very nervous about whether they achieve the tshuva. So we leave a piece on the rock right in front of him that will be a witness to the fact that it turned white, and all the sins, which were tolat shani, which are red. By the way, they just found an example of tolat shani. It's a little bug that gives red dye, and they used it in the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash, the big day kahuna. So therefore, what point in the service did it turn white? Tell me. At what point?
When it was pushed off the cliff.
Either right before or right after, or when they got there. It's not 100% clear to look in the Gemara, and the Mefarshim, but certainly not before reaching Tzuk. Okay? Tzuk was 12 miles or 12 mil away from the Beis Hamikdash. Now, the Kohen Gadol had a lot of work to do on Yom Kippur. He couldn't wait around all day. So at what point does he resume his service? Because the Torah says that they send the animal out midbara. I guess I get to the midbar. How do we know that we're safely in the midbar? Says the Mishnah and Yuma. They used to walk a mile, return a mile, a mil, and then wait a mil's worth of walking. And then they know that it got to the third sukkah, which is already firmly within the boundaries of the midbar, says the Mishnah. At that point, they had another string tied where? Where was another red string tied? On the doors of the Heichal, and it would turn white. And then they knew that they could resume the service. But the Kohen could say, okay, we were Yotzei sending the Seir, and now let's move on with the rest of the Avodas Hayom.
What did they do if it didn't turn white, though?
In the last 40 years of Beit Sheni, it didn't turn white.
Right.
They just proceeded. Or they had that trick of walking back and forth. One opinion is that they had flags, and they would signal with flags. But there were three ways of monitoring it that they said in the Mishkan. So they had to rely on the first two. But Rabbi says, Siman Gadol Hayalam, even in Beit Sheni, just the last 40 years. Last 40 years were, by the way, when they got together, the Sanhedrin, and condemned Yeshu to death, according to the Maran Sanhedrin. That was 40 years before the Churban, which already the Sanhedrin was exiled by the Romans out of Lishkas Hagazis, out of the Sanhedrin room in the temple compound, although it was not part of the Kadosh, it was full, but that's what they said. Okay. Now, don't you have a great question? When does it turn white in the tzuk? When he's walked already past the 10th sukkah, 2 more mills at the end of 12 miles. At what point does it turn white in the Beis Hamikdash? After 3 miles. That's a big difference in time. The procedure within the Beis Hamikdash continued well before, and the Lashon HaZohar is on the Beis Hamikdash itself, on the Mishkan itself. Beis Hamikdash itself turned white well before they got anywhere near the tzuk. There's a difference between going 3 miles versus going 12 miles. I'm sorry, walking 9 miles is a lot of time. How long would it take to walk 9 miles? It's hard to walk 9 minutes. Okay. If you're not in shape in this heat, right? 9 minutes, let alone 9 miles. So why did it turn white in the Beis Hamikdash so much earlier than it did by the tzuk? Aren't they supposed to be the same? They're supposed to be identical, little seirim, the same size, same weight, same cost, same everything. So why shouldn't it be the same? Why shouldn't it turn white at the same moment? You hear my question? Does this question make sense?
So did the atonement come the atonement come way before it was killed?
Well, that it didn't turn white.
No, in the Beis Hamikdash, it turned white.
Yes. So somehow the atonement that was needed to continue with the service, to know that that part was done, Avodas Yom Kippurim, it's all about kapara, right? Can continue well before it's finished in the midbar. Why?
Tircha de Tzibura.
That's
People-
interesting. That's interesting. But still,
Because the other one was in the reshut of the Sitra Achra.
Ah, okay. So there is a Rambam, and Rav Soloveitchik does explain this. I'll tell you very quickly. The Rambam says the Seir Mishtaleach is the tshuva of the Jewish people. It happens on Yom Kippur, which would be the equivalent of 10 days from now in our yet to be redeemed 3-week period. Today being our Rosh Hashanah in the yet to be redeemed sense. 10 more days from now, there'd be a Seir Mishtaleach that takes away Averos. Does it take away all Averos instantly if you do tshuva? Depends what they are, says the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. If it's a more minor offense, like you forgot to bench, you didn't do a mitzvah say, then it can be done. You don't have to wait till Yom Kippur. But on the more serious offenses, like a lo saseh, then you have to wait until Yom Kippur, and then you do your tshuva, and then it'll be wiped out Yom Kippur. But there's one type of, and then very serious averos, you need a combination of yisurim, suffering, and tshuva and Yom Kippur. But there's one avera, the biggest avera of all. What's the biggest avera a Jew can ever do? What is the worst offense of all? Tell me.
No.
Well, for which we're supposed to give our lives.
Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah berabim, which would be a chilul ha.
Hashem. Yeah.
That's why those 3 mitzvahs are you would rather die for, because the Jew demonstrably does in a time of persecution, in public, in front of 10 Jews or more, which will weaken the resolve of the Jewish people to withstand evil. Then you need Yisurim and death. So here's what I want to suggest. There are those sins among Klal Yisrael that are forgiven earlier. Because as we say, the day of Yom Kippur, Itzumo Shel Yom, and this combination of that with the Seir Mishtaleach and with Tshuva, okay, good. There are easier ones that even before Yom Kippur can be forgiven. But then there are certain things that require the mix of Yisurim and even Misa, which is why I think we kill the Seir HaMishtaleach. It is possible, by the way, according to some opinions, that if you shechted it, you could even eat it after Yom Kippur. The point is that it should be killed. We do more, the Mishnah says, they tear it limb to limb, which is a form of a most torturous death, as if to say, we want full tshuva. The tshuva is either going to come because we do tshuva and we draw close to Hashem, like the Seir Hashem, this is Rav Soloveitchik's idea, or there's going to be tshuva through suffering. Whether we really want to do tshuva or not, suffering will be mechaper on the Jewish people. And sometimes even loss of life, as we saw on Simchas Torah, which is the equivalent of the Tisha B'Av, which is the equivalent of, Tisha B'Av, which is the day of martyrdom, right? We saw it. So therefore, the 2 Seirim encompass the entire Jewish people's process of tshuva, the easier tshuva, and the tshuva that never comes for people who do not merit to just do tshuva and be forgiven, but they're not holding by doing tshuva, but Hashem will give them yisurim as a chesed, so that it will count as if they did tshuva, and hopefully they will in the end. So what do I want to say here? This thing that's happening tomorrow, the equivalent of Rosh Hashanah, where you'll have perhaps the future president and Kamala Harris is a warning to Klal Yisrael. Maybe it'll be President Trump. And then maybe the good things for Israel and for the Jewish people and for the world that he would like to do, that he says he was saved by Hashem, that hopefully he's listening because his ear got clipped, and will listen and will say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's one path. Or it could be a path of additional suffering and destruction. We don't know. Both are possibilities, but we have to daven. We have to daven that we don't need any more Yisurim, that we don't need any more misos, mishunos, and suffering, and chilul Hashem barabim that goes on. Okay, so that's what I want to tell you. Yes, there's ripened potential right now, ripened potential that, and I think I heard Rabbi Brider would say a similar thing. He's on the one hand so sad by what's going on, but on the other hand, in wonder and in hopeful anticipation that maybe, just maybe, this has all been a hafach turning for the good. Tomorrow being a cautionary tale, like Shavas B'Tammuz always is, and perhaps when he'll sit with President Trump, maybe that'll be a more auspicious day. We don't know. Leiv Malachim B'Yad Hashem, and a lot of it, I'd like to say, depends on us, depends on our attitude and our tshuva. So we must visualize the best outcomes for Klal Yisrael in this horrific war, the transformation of Israel into a country of believers who want to say to the world, as Netanyahu did when he responded to the Hague, which said, Ganavtim Eretz Shiva Amamim, and give it back right now with penalties. What did Netanyahu answer? Did you hear what he said? What he was forced to answer. What did he answer? I don't know if you saw it, but he said, we cannot steal our own homeland. We cannot steal the land that was given to us by Hashem, which is exactly the answer that Chazal tell us to say. And perhaps I'm sure what Lubavitch Rebbe, as far as I know, about conversations, he encouraged those that represented the Jews, especially in the United Nations, to get up and say it. Our claim is biblical. That's the only answer. You can't say Holocaust, because then they throw it back in your face and say, well, you do Holocaust, so that cancels out. But you can't cancel out Yad Hashem and the will of Hashem. And we're not here in it for ourselves, and we're not here to triumph, but we are looking to triumph over Ra, over evil, and to confront it, which is the first job of Mashiach, to counter Ra and turn the world on towards a good direction. This is what we're davening for. Have a easy fast, and we shall continue. Thank you for listening.
Shkaya, thank you.
Amazing share.
Thank you so much. We'll share it. Okay.
Please send it at the recording.
Thank you so much.